So as Danielle said, I've previously been working as a GTA, teaching focus inquiry for those of you who are familiar with that program, and then helping with the development of the Science of Happiness class. I'm working on finishing my PhD in educational psychology, which is also essentially, as it sounds, the science of student motivation and engagement and sense of belonging, specifically in a classroom context. Prior to my arrival at VCU, I worked in the K-12 and higher education classroom for the past 20-ish years, and prior to that in the corporate world for human resources. You can see as it goes further back in time, I get much more fuzzy with the timelines so that I don't have you doing math in your head to try to figure out how old I am. But I have, so I also have a MSW from VCU. I got my graduate teaching certificate through VCU, and I share all of this because all of that has led me to where I am today, a job that I am very, very excited to be in, but it also informs how I intend to fulfill my role as administrative director and helping to translate the research going forward. It's okay. So again, today, so COBE has a number of translational initiatives already in place, this being one of them, the COBE Connect lunches that we have the first Tuesday of each month. We collaborate with the Wellness Resource Center, the Well, on their Stall Street Journal. There's always a COBE corner there that helps us to promote some of the research findings that come out of the Spit for Science. Today I'm only going to speak about two specific programs, probably because if I wanted to talk about all of them, I would go on for several hours, and I'm not afforded that much time today, so lucky for you. So my role, as Dr. Dick said, is to help promote COBE's mission, which is to promote behavioral and emotional health among young people through integration of research with coursework, programming, and policy. So I'm going to talk about a program, and I'm going to talk about coursework. I also, along with Dr. Dick and others, I'm on the Wellness Council that is forming, a newly forming group across both campuses that will then hopefully be able to inform policy as well. Before I get into describing these, I do just want to clarify these terms of well-being and happiness. I tend to go back and forth between the two. They're both used to express the experience of positive aspects of our lives, either in the moment or over time. Neither one of them is a singular concept, but it's more of a complex construct that has no singular designation. So consider the construct weather. We say weather, it's really not one thing. There's a lot of different things that inform that particular construct. And while well-being and or happiness in and of itself is difficult to measure as a unidimensional concept, we can measure the factors that contribute to the complex construct and then get a sense of what we mean by well-being and or happiness. So some of these factors are, this is a list of just several. So sometimes within the research that we use to inform practice, people will refer to well-being, but they mean subjective well-being, or they'll refer to happiness, and they're referring to complete mental health. So see, these are just some of the factors that, as one of my sources was describing it, braid together to form these constructs. Again, looking at the big picture at the university level, the way that we view mental health is not just the absence of mental illness, but the promotion, so promoting the positive side of emotional, psychological, and social well-being. Flourishing health and wellness, we want to make sure that becomes the center of students' university experiences, not just focusing on the academics. So again, my role is to help to bring theory to practice through programming, taking the research, evaluating the programming, and then feeding it back in. And this too, again, can be done at multiple levels within a university setting. So starting at the research level, looking at the effects of practices on college student well-being, and that's some of the research that we do through our COBE collaborations. Residential life, students outside of the classroom, their living environments. COBE is doing that through the Thrive Living Learning Community, which I'll be talking about today. Also through their curriculum, their lives in the classroom, but also considering the well-being of the person as student, talking about the Science of Happiness class and some of the spin-off classes that come from that. And then the larger university campaign, which is what the Wellness Council is seeking to do, to inform practice, become a positive university. that promotes well-being. So our Thrive Living Learning Community, this is the second year that we have had this. It's a collaboration between the Wellness Resource Center and Residential Life and COBE. And the Thrive community is a program called Program in Residence. And that particular type of LLC or living learning community is designed to give students experience in and out of the classroom, where they are able to live together, have a shared living experience and a shared classroom experience, and to interact with faculty both in and outside of the classroom as well. So the LLCs that are the programs in residence, such as Thrive, tend to have, they will have a specific class associated with it that the students will have to take. And then there's specific programming that occurs within the residence halls related to the LLC. It was originally begun last year in the 16-17 school year. We had 30 students participating in that first year. Students were in Rhodes Hall and they had priority seating in the Science of Happiness class. Some of the activities that were led by my predecessor, Tom Bernard, who's in the back of the room, included a lot of activities off campus, but also within the residential hall. So you can see this was a free yoga that took place in the residence hall for students, but in the Thrive LLC, but also outside of the LLC. It was open to the public. Other things, field trips to Belle Isle, collaborating with the Well for mindful moments, etc. The other thing that with our faculty interaction outside of the classroom is we call them fireside chats. It's an opportunity for students to get to know the faculty associated with COBE, associated with the Science of Happiness in their residence halls in a much more casual setting, so they can have some question and answering. So this fall, in addition to our Thrive LLC, we're collaborating with Recreational Sports with their LLC, which is called FIT. So we call it the Thrive FIT collaboration. And together, we have students who are interested in wellness and well-being and in all realms of well-being, physical, emotional, social, working together in their residence halls. So we now have 2 floors of Rhodes Hall with the Thrive and FIT collaboration. And the difference between the two, the FIT program is not a program in residence, it's a themed community. So they aren't required to take Science of Happiness. But we hope that with our Thrive students coming back and sharing what they're learning in the classroom, that our FIT residents will be interested in taking the class in the spring semester. In the spring semester, where we don't have the priority seating for our Thrive community, most of the students come in saying that they are taking the class based on word of mouth from somebody else who has been in the class. We, in the past 2 years, have capped it at 50 students. We feel that's sort of the maximum capacity for the class, and we stay full as soon as we put open up the registration. And when I've been watching the registration this past fall, we only had about 16 or 17 slots available to the general VCU community, and the minute somebody would drop out, that class would fill up really quickly. And the other thing that was exciting for me to see this fall was, again, spreading the word of mouth, was that academic advisors were advising their students to take the class because they had heard good things about it. And one of the directors in the Bachelor of Interdisciplinary Studies specifically started sending students to that class because she knew of the class as well. So it's exciting to see it continue to spread. I talked about wanting to share some of the science and research behind our programming and why we're doing what we're doing. And with the Thrive and FIT and these LLCs, the sense of belonging, the construct that is the sense of belonging, a student's sense of being part of a community, really undergirds the Res Life idea behind these LLCs. And they have their own research that they're doing to get a sense of retention for the students who are in the LLCs based on the extent to which they feel like they belong both to the residence hall, to the community, but also to the greater VCU and Richmond community. So in our early days with this year's Thrive and FIT collaboration, in the first few days that the students were on campus, we specifically had some programming events that were designed to increase students' sense of belonging as members of these communities, but also as members of VCU in the Richmond area. So we were given the opportunity to have our students move in a day early. They moved in on Friday while the rest of the first-year students were moving in on Saturday. And we were there to greet them and welcome them as they moved in, along with their RAs. And then Saturday morning, while the bulk of the first-year students were moving in, we all met in the Cary Street gym. We did some ice-breaking activities to help them get to know each other and come out of their rooms and know each other's names. And then Carrie Baines, who's my collaborator through the rec sports, gave them a tour of the Cary Street gym so that they are comfortable going there. They know how to do it. They become experts on how to get around. And then when we had finished all of that, as a group, we walked down to Belle Isle so the students would know how to get there. And in this first programming activity of the about 70 students that we have between the two LLCs, we had, I think, around 40 students participating, and they had to meet at 9 o'clock on Saturday morning on their first morning. So we were really happy with that, and the students really seemed to enjoy being out and about. It was a beautiful day, albeit a little hot. When they got back to campus after our half day of programming, then in order to reap the benefits of moving in early Friday night, they were asked to give back as a service opportunity to help other freshman students move into the dorms, into the residence halls. So their afternoon was spent helping people unpack and take all of their belongings in and checking in on them. They were really having a great time. They became the resident experts. They'd been there all of 24 hours, so they knew the place, they knew what they were doing, and they really had a lot of fun doing it. So we were really pleased to see that it wasn't, oh, I can't believe we have to do this. They felt great being able to give it back. There's research behind altruism and random acts of kindness and things like that supports that. It was quasi-altruistic because we made them do it. So with our Thrive LLC, there is also, again, taking theory into programming and then doing research and evaluation. There is a study that was conducted over the past year called VCU Lives Study, and it's a grant from Bringing Theory to Practice that was awarded to Dr. Dick. And Zoe Neal, who's one of the graduate doctoral students working with our lab and working with COBE, is kind of taking the lead on the implementation of this research project, but looking at the effectiveness of our Thrive LLC in the context of other LLCs, but also in the larger non-themed housing. And you can get a sense. So this was what the data collection side. They started with online surveys that were taken over the course of the year, followed up with focus groups and interviews, all of that last year. You can see some of the constructs that were measured as part of this study. And then she's in the process of analyzing this data to then help it come back and inform our practice in the Thrive community, but also our practice in the Science of Happiness class as well, and information for the residential life. So it takes the research full circle again. The other piece that I wanted to talk about today in more detail of our translation activities is our class that we call the Science of Happiness. And these are some examples that are popular that you see. Time Magazine has run special issues on the Science of Happiness, and they do a pretty good job of basing what they're doing on this on science. Happify.com is a fantastic site that is a great translation site for research based on the factors that contribute to happiness. But when we teach this class to the students, the very beginning of the class, we want to make sure that the students understand that our focus is on science. This is not just popular psychology. This is just not popular books out in the media, such as The Secret or The Power of Positive Thinking. We really emphasize teaching the science to the students and what we mean by science and what we mean by happiness and all of the different constructs that undergird that term happiness that I mentioned at the beginning. We want our students to become informed consumers of the research, not only in this area, of course this area is meaningful to them, but also in other areas as they continue through their academic career. So our version of Science of Happiness, these are some of the different topics that we teach across the 14 weeks in which we have content delivery. The class is team taught by a number of faculty and faculty researchers across both campuses, the medical campus and the academic campus. And each week a different guest lecturer will come in and speak to his or her expertise. And it's a Monday, Wednesday, Friday class. So on Monday and Wednesday, there is what we call content delivery and interaction engagement with the expert. And then on Fridays, we have small group discussion to allow the students to process what they've learned. And it's on a wide range of topics, focusing again specifically on the science. So that was what we teach, and this is how we teach it, and this is my wheelhouse. So this is sort of the educational psychology aspect of what is the science that undergirds how we teach what we teach in this particular class. So it's done through intentional course design, intentional content sequencing, and intentional assessment design. So what we ask them to do, how we ask them to do it, and how we provide it to them is all very intentional, based on specific theoretical bases and best practices. And I share these theories and again, the science behind these with the students so that we can have vocabulary that we keep returning to. So early on in the class, when I'm talking to them, whether it's in the small group discussion or the few courses that I teach, weeks that I teach, self-determination theory, it's Ryan and Deci. Am I saying it? I always thought it was DC, but I've heard Deci. Their theory that says that there are 3 basic psychological needs that need to be met in order for us to be motivated to act towards our goal and to progress towards our goals: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. And I share this with the students very early on in the semester so that as we go through the semester, the activities that they do, the exercises that they do, some of the constructs that they're learning about, I will return to those terms and ask them, to what extent does this help with autonomy, competence, and relatedness? So autonomy, a sense that they have a control over what is happening so that they can be motivated to work towards their goals. Competence, that they feel that they have the skills necessary to continue to act forward towards their goals. And then relatedness, that these activities that are being provided to them are something that they can relate to and that are meaningful to them in their lives. And all that we do in Science of Happiness is through this filter to make sure that we touch on those 3 psychological needs. It's also taught through a learner-centered teaching paradigm, which is essentially, instead of me being the expert on what the students need to know, or our faculty who teach the class, we let the students gather the information that they need ahead of time, which I'll show you when I talk about how they get the content delivery, and ask questions. And we hold them responsible for their own learning. At the very beginning, when we talk about how the class is graded, we tell them that they earn the points towards their goal, and they can get as many points as they want to earn based on the extent to which they engage in the class, in the exercises, and all of the assignments. And we are here to facilitate that process for them in any way possible. And it's a real shift in thinking from being sage on the stage, where I tell you what to think, I tell you what to learn. Because we want this to be highly relatable to our students, to increase their own competence, and for them to have autonomy, we want to foster them really becoming engaged in the coursework and taking of it what is most meaningful to them. I've, in previous descriptions of Science of Happiness, I've described it, sometimes I talk about it as a buffet where students can go along and pick and choose what they want from our content and decide what's meaningful to them. Sometimes I talk about it as like a candy sampler where there's all these different choices, and if you're anything like me, you eat them all. So it's really just a question of how the students perceive it. Some people really try to take it all in, and some people pick and choose what's most meaningful to them. And with our intentional course design, they can do that and still be successful. So intentional content sequencing, we front load a lot of the theoretical models that undergird the class. We teach them the vocabulary associated with these models, with the Keys model of complete mental health, the genetic influences on human behavior, well-being theory, to use the acronym PERMA. We use all of that. I'm teaching the PERMA class tomorrow, and Dr. Dick taught the genetic influences on human behavior last week. So we teach all of these large concepts up front so that we can keep returning to them again and again, which is the spiral curriculum, which basically says you introduce everything that you're going to teach up front, and then you keep returning to it at a deeper and deeper level, so that it really becomes something that the students can take in and understand and comprehend. So just some examples, we present in the very first week of class. The students read about it. They take the scale to assess where they fall on this Keys model of complete mental health. And what this does is it immediately gets them out of this thinking that mental health and mental illness are dualistic, that it's not just an either or, but it's in fact a both and. And when they take this Keys flourishing scale, they can get there, they can map where they fall on this wheel to see to what extent are they flourishing, which is living sort of your best possible life, to what extent are they languishing. If you look at this model, you can have low mental illness, but also low mental health and languishing. It's kind of like you're just bobbing through life like a cork and not really living to your best potential. But you can also have high mental illness and still be flourishing. So we show this to the students to understand, so that they understand that even with a mental illness of some sort or some other factors that negatively impact their life, they can still live a positive life and have a life well lived in the long term. This is the pie chart. I know that this particular chart comes up through multiple lectures that we have. Dr. Dick just shared it with them last week, and it comes up in several of the lectures that we have from our faculty. And basically, and please correct me if I go astray here, but basically if we take all of the research on things that have a genetic influence in our lives, and if we could possibly compile it all together, we could generally say that 50% of our behavior is influenced by a genetic predisposition. 10% is influenced by a context, which we may or may not have control over. Particularly at the college level, students may not have a lot of control over the context in which, if they're in a residence hall, they have a roommate, some of those things that they may or may not be able to control. But that leaves us with 40%. That is, our human behavior is influenced by intentional activity that we choose to do. And that's what we focus on in the Science of Happiness. We're teaching the students the scientific-based or evidence best practices to increase your wellness and your happiness and your well-being through intentional activity. And again, we continue, once we teach this, then we can say, are you functioning in the 40%? And keep on returning back to that with the students. And then, as I said, well-being theory also is an overarching theory that we teach up front. And it's, again, multidimensional, and it includes some aspects that often aren't included in theories of well-being. Positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishment. And this particular theory of well-being includes both eudaimonic and hedonic well-being. So eudaimonic being our happiness over our lifespan. When I get to the ripe old age, beyond my age, and I look back and I say, I have lived a life worth living. I've lived a good life through cultivating my strengths and my virtues. So it's a long-term reflective type of well-being. And hedonic well-being is our day-to-day happiness. How do I feel today? And this particular well-being theory considers both of them. We take attendance using a Google Forms quiz. The students scan a QR code that's posted around the classroom. It takes them to the really 1 or 2 question quiz. And I check in with them. How are you doing today on a scale of 1 to 10? What questions do you have about this week's reading? So that I can get all of that information while I get attendance from them without taking up course time. And that allows us to constantly adapt and assess kind of where the students are. It's informal, it doesn't go towards their grade. This is an example of the type of science that we use, so examples of a figure that we would use to help our students understand what we mean by the science. Explaining what this figure means and how these different 5 factors that feed into this PERMA model are statistically significant in this particular study, and how to read this so that, again, they become informed consumers of research moving forward. So there's all of these different levels that we're doing in this class. It's not simply here's some content, input in, input out. Really getting them to challenge their thinking. So then the final piece that I mentioned that we do in our class is intentional assignment design. And this is the list of the different assignments that we have in the class. There are no tests. Each week we start with a scientific reading. We have them read it before they come to class. So we want to prime their thinking before they come in and have the expert in the room so that they can ask questions of the person who is there that week talking about their level of expertise. Weekly exercises are designed to be interactive and experiential, and that's their opportunity to process on an individual basis that week's scientific content. So what's the topic today? And I'm processing it myself. Then at the end of the week, as I said, we have small group discussions where it gives the students, our lectures that we have by our guest instructors are very, very content dense, because these are folks who go around the world, and a lot of them, and do keynote speeches. So they have a lot of really good content to share, and we're asking them to give about 20-25 minutes. It's usually 50 solid minutes of content delivery. So Fridays we have these small group discussions so that the students can process everything that they've learned and done during the course of the week. This small group discussion component came as a result of student feedback after our pilot class. Students, in the first iteration of the class, we had them doing blog posts. They didn't like that. They wanted to get to know each other. So we changed the class moving forward so that rather than interacting online, they interacted through small group discussions that are facilitated and prompted to prompt their thinking. It's not just informal, it's very intentional. Then also they have social media posts each week. That's a way for them to process their content in a different form. They have to find a representative version of media of what their content was for the week. And they can't just send out somebody else's content, they have to comment on it and reflect on it. Or they can create their own Facebook post or things like that, but it's a little snippet social media post, a tweet, something like that. So they're going to have to take a lot of thoughts and condense it into a short summary in order to do well on the social media post. The flip side of that is blog posts. So the blog posts, they have 3 per semester. Again, in our first pilot class, we had 1 each week, and we got very strong feedback from the students about that level of responsibility and the volume of writing. So they have 3 during the semester, and those prompts are designed to help them make connections. So what did you learn in the first 6 weeks of class? How does this relate to that, to get to that relatedness, to get to that connection? And then as you make those connections cognitively, it allows for application and retention of the content at a different level. And then the final, the representative image also on their blog post. So not only are they writing a rather extensive blog post, but they have to find an image that represents it. So thinking in terms of all of these words, what's a picture that could represent that? Taking it to a deeper level of cognitive processing. And then their final project that they work on all semester, it's scaffolded, we break it apart, we give them little due dates throughout the course of the semester, and they have to take what they've learned on one topic, and they go out into the community, whether it's VCU, their residence hall, Greater Richmond community, and they have to do a project to promote or teach on some aspect of the course content. Then they come back and they present a reflective analysis of how they felt their project went, and what they would do differently. So again, that becomes an iterative process where they are out trying it out, seeing how it worked, researching behind it, doing it, and then metacognitive reflection back on what was successful, what would I do differently. All of these activities are designed to get them to work on both at the cognitive level, but at the metacognitive level as well. So thinking about their thinking about their work and their goal setting. And if you think about what we're asking them to do here, they're reading, they're writing, and they're taking scales for their weekly exercises. They're discussing and collaborating with peers, so verbal processing of the content, social media posts, more media-based processing of their content, blog posts, very writing, composition heavy. And then final project is through action. So we're attacking this content processing through all different modes. The type of experiential exercises, so draw a family tree. And then we talk about it in tracing a trait, discussing based on our course content at the end of the week. Complete a scale. So we use a number of different scientific scales that they complete. They get their results back, and then we discuss their results. We don't discuss their results in terms of I am this and I am that, but more what did you learn and what was surprising. Write 3 good things that happened each day and why they happened. That gets at that the writing piece, the reflecting piece, but also that intentional activity. What did you do to help make that good thing happen? And then we have them for 1 week track their eating or sleeping or moving habits. We break them up into groups, and then they discuss within their groups and share as a class, what can we do different as VCU students to increase our physical and nutritional and sleeping habits. And these are all based on the content that is taught that week. So this is where we are in our first 2 years of Science of Happiness and Thrive. So we started with a pilot for Science of Happiness. We had 27 students. We had 1 ACET student. If you're not familiar with the ACET program, it's a fantastic program that VCU has. It's grant funded. and it supports students with intellectual challenges to be able to come to college, be in a classroom, full inclusion in a college classroom, and earn a specific certificate upon completion of the number of courses. They also have an internship in a professional area of one of their choices. So in our first pilot class, we had our first ACET student participate. And then in fall, this was the first class that we required Thrive students. We had a total of 57 students, 20 of whom were Thrive. We realized that 50 is kind of the tipping point for allowing students to feel that interaction with each other, allowing them to feel that sense of belonging and feel like we were one group. So we started capping the course at 50. In the spring, an elective opened to all students, so we had 50 students, 2 of whom were ACET students. And then this fall, because it was a required class for the first year Thrive students, 31 of the students in the class were from the Thrive community, so that was great. 2 ACET students again, and then the other students came again from throughout the general student body. We get students across all disciplines, all different academic levels. I've had staff who want to take the class. We haven't figured that part out, but that's on my to-do list for January. And then with the Thrive Living Learning community, you can see the numbers. Our first cohort was last year, and now with our Thrive and Fit collaboration, we have about 70 students living across 2 floors. So this really sort of summarizes everything that I've just said on a small chart with lots of arrows. But our goal in COBE is to take the research that we have, inform our coursework and our programming through Thrive and Science of Happiness. And we have other classes that have flourishing classes come off of Science of Happiness, and a yoga class that has kind of been built upon that. We're studying it through studies such as VCU Lives, and then feeding it all back into the research and keeping that cycle going. So this is all my take on my job of translating the research, of what we are all doing in COBE in terms of translating the research. I acknowledge I am a biased source because I love my job and I love what we're doing, but I want to introduce maybe a less biased source, because we have a student here, Munira Hassan, who has volunteered to share her experience, unsolicited. She volunteered to share her experience as a Science of Happiness student, and she kind of wanted to talk about her experience going forward. Munira.
So like she said, I'm a former Science of Happiness student. I'm also a senior and a biochemistry student. And I happily volunteered to come talk to y'all because I have these conversations all the time with my friends, especially the younger ones. So I guess I'm here to give you a little bit of a perspective on how COBE has affected me as a student. So kind of all of this research is going into these programs. What do we get out of it? So I took the Science of Happiness at first kind of as like this looks interesting, it's at 11, so I don't have to get up super early and whatever. And I thought it'd be fun, and it was fun. It was very fun, but it was also much more impactful than I think myself or most of my classmates thought it would be. I think there are 2 main reasons for that. The first reason being the kind of immediate translation of what we're learning into our lives. I'm a chemistry major, like I said. I love my classes, I love my courses, but a lot of the things that we learn, I might not be applying for a couple more years. The Science of Happiness is not like that. So a really fun example, I think, would be SERPs. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but Dr. Vasileva does amazing research over on her campus, and she came over and talked to us about her research with impulsivity. And within that same week, we took a SERP skill. So it kind of puts us as students into her research, and we can say, oh, okay, so we have this theory, and now we know how it applies to us, and it gives us that secondary perspective on research that we might not have thought twice about the first time around. And I can say that was definitely my experience. So I thought it'd be fun, if you guys will humor me a little, to do an exercise that we did in class that I still use. I took the class months ago. So I think that does say something. It's a breathing exercise, so I'm gonna move that so y'all can see. So I'll explain it, and then we can do it together, maybe, hopefully. So the idea, it's a 4-7-8 breath, and the idea is that it helps calm you down, it helps you go to sleep, it helps lower stress hormones. I did it before I came up here. I don't know if it's working. So I'll explain it. First you exhale through your mouth and empty out your lungs, so it's also kind of loud, but that's okay. We're all gonna do it together, so don't feel worried about it. So you exhale, right? And then you inhale through your nose for 4 seconds. So and then you hold it for 7, and then you exhale through your mouth for 8. So you make kind of like a whoosh sound. So you go for 8 seconds. So if you guys want to try it with me, it's fun, I promise. So exhale, right? We're all kind of letting out a breath. And then inhale through your nose for 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 7, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then exhale for 8. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 seconds sounds like a long time, right? It's kind of weird, but so you could do that 4 times and do that twice a day, and it's supposed to help you sleep better. It's supposed to help lower your stress hormones. But what I also could have just said when I came up here is that we did a breathing practice, and deep breathing stimulates your parasympathetic nervous system, as opposed to short breaths, which stimulate your sympathetic nervous system, which stimulate your fight or flight response, which then stimulates stress hormones. So I don't know about you guys, but remembering all of that was much easier when I was able to practice it myself. And I think the really cool thing about the class is if you guys wanted, you could literally do that today and the rest of your life if you felt like it was relevant to you. And that's that immediate translation from what we're learning in class to how it affects you. So the second thing that I think makes the class really unique is how we can expand on the concepts that we're learning. So as a hard science major, there's kind of this idea that like, oh, I really like this protein, but I'm gonna sit on it until I write my dissertation. And that's not what research is. That's kind of an antiquated idea. But I know that myself as a student, that's kind of what I thought coming in, and I know that's what a lot of other people think as well. So Science of Happiness does a really good job of saying, okay, you learned all this stuff, but do you know it well enough to talk about it with someone else? Do you know it well enough to go out into your communities and implement it? For our final project, we used the internet and positive psychology. We wanted to see if acts of kindness on the internet kind of worked in similar ways to ones physically. And that was us saying, okay, we have this idea and we learned all these concepts, but can we actually apply it? And it was a really fun, successful project. We had kids down in a high school in Tennessee by the end of it talking about what we had planned based on what we learned. And I think from a researcher perspective, that's really cool because you'll come in on Monday and you'll have kids who you might not ever meet talking about your research by Friday. So I think it's a really unique way to immediately take what you're learning into the communities. So that's my Science of Happiness experience. I found out that I really liked research through that. And from there, I went to the Spit for Science boot camp, which the lovely Dr. Atkins, along with Dr. Sue and Nate Thomas run. And they give you all of these tools and say, hey, so you're interested in research? Here's Spit for Science. Here's what you can do. Figure out what you're interested in and have fun. And I'm really fortunate to have gone through that. And now I'm in a space where I can help, or I can start design my own projects based on what I'm interested in. So it's kind of a convoluted story to say this is where I am now. And I hope if nothing else, I helped elucidate that COBE, for me especially, really put research back into real life for me. You know, research isn't this thing where there are people in white coats who talk to people in suits, and then we don't find anything out for another 5-10 years. It's something that's really informed by real life, and your experiences are what inspire us, I guess. So yeah, that was my experience. I hope that if you're a student and you have any questions, feel free to hit me up. I will talk about it all day long. Thank you very much.